Okay. Uh, Today's lesson is about while loops. One sec. Okay. While loops are used in programming when you need to execute code over and over again. Um, and there's two types of loops. There's indefinite loops, which are while loops, and definite loops, which is for loops. So we're going to talk about while loops first. A while loop is a control structure that repeats instructions as long as some condition is true. So it's kind of like an if statement, except the code inside it runs multiple times. So it looks similar to an if statement where you have the while keyword, your condition, and then the loop body. So imagine this is your while loop. You have your condition, which is when count, which is a number, is less than 5. And then your loop body is console.log count and count plus plus. Count plus plus means it increments count, so it adds 1 to count. So if count is 0, and you do um, this while loop, condition is true because count is 0 and 0 is less than 5. And then it console.logs count to the console. And then it increases count by 1, which is what the increment operator does. And now, usually in an if statement, it will just continue the code. But in a while loop, it'll go back to the top and it'll run the condition again. So since count is less than 5 again, it's going to go through the loop body again. Console.log count, count plus plus, counts 2 now, and then it'll run the condition, and then it'll keep doing that until count is less than 5 is not true anymore. So right now counts 4, and 4 is still less than 5. So it's going to run the loop one last time, and then it's going to be 5 is less than 5, and 5 is not less than 5. So since it's false, it's not going to run the code. It's just going to jump forward to the next line. So an infinite loop is a loop that has a condition that will always be true. So in the last loop you guys saw, this loop eventually was false because count was 5 and 5 is less or 5 is more than 5. But it can be an infinite loop too. So imagine you don't have this count variable here that increments count, then it's just going to keep repeating and count's never going to be more than 5. Another way you could do this um, is by, yeah, making a condition that will never change. So imagine you have count equal to 1 and count is more than 0. If you keep increasing count, count will always be more than 0 because it's just increasing a number. Um, you can also simplify this by saying while true. So instead of making a condition that will evaluate to true, you can just write true inside of the while loop, and it'll also run this forever. So let's try this out. So CodeHS is a little glitchy with uh, infinite while loops. It most likely will crash the page, but we could try them. So we have the main function and our while loop, and we can define a count variable and set to 0. Now, your um, your loop body should always have something that increments or decrements this count variable, because if you don't, then this loop can become an infinite loop. So imagine in here we put while count is less than 7. If we never increment the count variable, this code is going to run forever. So we want to avoid infinite loops. And then we can print count is print count. Okay, so this code is basically what we just did. You have a count variable that's 0, and then while count is less than 7, it's going to keep incrementing count and logging count out to the console. So if we run this, we'll see you get this message 6 times, and then as soon as count is 6, it'll console log this out, and then it'll increase count by 1. Count will be 7, and this statement will not be true, so it's going to end the loop. So we can also write this down here. And so that's how you know the loop just ended. So imagine instead of this, we put while true, or we can also do while 5 is less than 6. Since 5 is always less than 6, this is the same thing as saying while true. So if we try this out, you'll see you don't see anything here, but the web page basically just crashed. So you can see I can't drag anything around. None of the buttons work. So you have to be careful to not make an infinite loop by accident or on purpose. Okay, um, let's get back to the slideshow. For loops. So for loops are definite loops. So they don't run until a condition is met. They run a specific amount of times. So a for loop is a control structure that repeats instructions for a fixed number of times. You can see this is a for loop header. It looks pretty big, but it always has these three components, and it also has a loop body. So here you can see there's the for keyword, the initializer, which is making a new variable called I, let I equal 0. It's making a new variable called I that's equal to 0. There's a condition, which is when I is less than count. And there's the iterator, which is I plus plus. This is just the same thing as saying count plus plus, which just increases the variable by 1. Okay, yeah, this is just the same thing as saying I equals I plus 1. So you make the variable, which is I with value of 0. I is less than 3 right now because I is 0. So you run the code inside. Then this code runs I plus plus. This basically runs at the end of the for loop, but you don't see it because it's up here. So I plus plus, I becomes 1. It runs this condition again, and if this condition is true, then it'll run the code inside again. Again, it runs the condition, or not the condition, the increments, and then it runs the condition, and then it runs the code inside. And then finally, since you did I plus plus and I is 3, 3 is not less than 3, so it's going to skip ahead and go to the next line. So here's what that would look like. You can see this is the same thing as a while loop, except it's a lot shorter because it's only in one line. And also you could use while loop for more things. You could use it to, let's say you want to ask the user input and you want to keep asking them input until their input is like the right answer or something. You could use a while loop for that, but you cannot use a for loop. So a for loop is just a shorter way to um, write a loop that runs for a set amount of time. You can see you have to use the variable I in a loop. So this is just a way that you can reference the variable. So if you want to actually know how many times the loop ran inside of the loop, you can use the I variable. So the first one, the loop ran 0 times, second one, loop ran 1 time, and the third time it ran 2 times. I know the counting is kind of confusing, but just think that it starts from 0 because it says let I equal 0, and it ends at 2 because 2 is the last number where I is still less than 3. Okay, so here's your for loop structure. And you can use any numbers for this. So you can do let I equal 10. Um, you can also do I minus minus. So if you want the loop to go backwards, then you have to use this. You can do I minus equals 3. So you can see this is one of the operators that we learned on Tuesday or something. Yeah, I think it was Tuesday. It's basically just means this, but in a shorter format. Uh, and then you can also do this. You can reverse this equal to because imagine you want to count down to count. So you start from 10 and you go down to whatever count is. You have to use I minus minus. You have to set I to a bigger value, and then you have to do this. So we'll use an example later. And you can use any condition here. You can use more than equal to any equality. Okay, so let's see what this code does. First, it makes a new variable called I with a value of 10. It runs this code as long as I is more than 0, and it runs this iterator. So here's what the output looks like. You can see when I is equal to 10, um, it'll run this condition, and since 10 is more than 0, it'll run the console.log. You can see 10. It goes down to 8 because I minus equals 2 means it subtracts 2 from 10. So it goes to 8, it goes to 6, 4, 2, and then the final time, it goes to 0, but since 0 is not more than 0, it'll not run this code. So you can see there's no 0 output. We can create a variable outside the for loop and update it within the for loop. So here you can see this for loop runs 5 times. It's not that clear, but once you guys get used to it, you can see that this runs 5 times. You have this variable called age, and you're adding 1 to age. So since you're adding 1 to age and this loop runs 5 times, this age variable will be increased by 5 by a value of 5. So basically this thing just adds 5 to age. So you can see here, it goes in order, it goes from 11, 12, 13, 14 until it adds the total 5. Okay, so let's try this out. I want to see if my, okay, I think I might have broken. Okay, so let's say count is equal to 0, and then at the end we output um, count, and then we write a for loop where we increase count by 1. Also just do plus equals 1. So inside of your for loop, you want to first initialize the variable. We usually call it I because I stands for index, and index is just too long to write, so you just use I. Then you write your conditional, so I is less than some value, let's just say 5 or something, and then I plus plus, because this is what's going to happen to the I variable after every run. So here you can see um, this loop runs 5 times because it starts from 0 and it goes to 4. It does not go to 5 because 5 is not more than 5, or 5 is not equal to 5. Wait, no. 5 is not less than 5. So if this loop runs 5 times and it adds 1 to 0 5 times, then you can see the total is 5. So if we just console log this out, you'll see it's easier to see what it's doing. So this is what the output looks like. Um, Now this count variable is being updated before this console.log. So let's just run the first loop. Count is 0. This loop runs once. Count is increased by 1. So now count is 1. And then it console.logs it out. That's why it starts from 1. Uh, can you put your error in Discord just so I can see it? Or Zoom chat, I don't know. Okay, let's try to recreate the what was it they did? Oh yeah, they counted down. So let's try this. Instead of starting from 0, let's start from 5, and let's end when I is more than 0. And let's do I minus this. So I will start from 5. I will decrease by 1, and then I'll run this conditional, and I'll keep decreasing by 1 until I is no longer more than 0. So let's just try using this. You can see I starts as 5, and it ends whenever it's not more than 0. Okay, let's finally try to do minus equals 2. Uh, let's also keep the constant alive. I think you can see the output. Okay, so here you can see the loop only runs 3 times. That's because first it starts at 5, but since it does minus equals 2, it gets to 3 on the second second run of the while loop. So you can see if you want to go down by 2, then it kind of messes up with how many times the loop runs. So just keep that in mind when you're using minus equals 2 instead of minus minus. Okay, I don't know what you're doing. A pen child? I think you're using not plain JavaScript. Try making a sandbox with plain JavaScript because it just becomes more complicated when you're using a script tag. Okay, now let's try multiplying count by 2 every iteration of the loop. So let's start from 0 again and get to less than 5. So again, this loop runs 5 times. And let's try times equaling, this just means multiplying it by 2 to the count variable. So and then if we constant all log out count, you can see first it does count times equals 2, so it becomes 2. Multiplies 2 by 4, so it becomes 4. Or no, it multiplies 2 by 2 again, becomes 4. Multiplies 4 by 2, so it just basically multiplies by 2 5 times. And then you can increase this number to like 10, and it'll just keep multiplying by 2. Now, you can do whatever you want inside this for loop, but we have to also look at while loops. So imagine we have a while loop where we want to get to this number. One way we could do that is by saying while count is not equal to 1024, then do count times equal to 2. So the count is going to start at 1, it's going to go to 2, 4, 8. It's going to go all the way up to 1024, and then it's not going to work because count is equal to 124, which means it's going to be false. Sorry, I forgot to count about line. There. So you can see it goes all the way up to 10,024. Um, but since it is 10,024, this is false. So it'll not run this while loop for the other times. And then you can go to any triple or any one of these multiples of 2. Okay. Uh, Today I could not find any homework that really focused on while loops or for loops. So just try making a while loop or a for loop do something that you want to do. But there's no other homework for today. And can you just put your questions in the Discord? Because I have no idea what's going on.